Welcome to the 4T Pill. Are you tired of the average colored pill movement? Ready to step it up to the next best thing? Maybe you're not actually feeling like that whole proto-fascist baloney is for you. No matter the case, the 4T Pill is for you.
It's 4T, back with a little commentary sesh.
Yeah, we're breaking down Bernie Sanders. Just a small part, just looking at a little facet about his 2020 presidential bid. I, for one, am excited. I'm a Bernie bro, but maybe I can convince you to become a Bernie bro as well. So we'll take a look in this short little splash of 4T's episode that we got going here.
Yeah. So, we're here to chat about Bernie and his 2020 presidential run. If any of you haven't caught wind of that, a couple days ago, he, after much kind of hype and expectation, a lot of people were expecting this to happen, but no one was entirely sure. And he just broke the ice and just let the cat out of the bag, went, hey, I'm running.
Exactly. And there's been a lot of speculation around this because he and Elizabeth Warren had a meeting. And obviously it was to discuss, that they sat down and I forgot, I think it was at one of their own homes, actually. So it was a very personal type meeting.
This is new to me. Sounds like some Illuminati shit. What's going on here?
It obviously wasn't in a cafe. Don't quote me on that. I can't actually remember the story now, but they met in private, off the books, kind of. Everybody kind of found out about it, but obviously because they're both public figures. But, what we assumed was that they were discussing the presidential campaign. And then soon after that, Elizabeth Warren announced that she was launching an exploratory committee, not necessarily launching her bid, but, and so, there was a lot of speculation about what came out of that meeting, and it's kind of interesting to see them both in the running now. Was this part of the meeting? But anywho, just looking into Bernie Sanders as a candidate. I love him. How do you feel about him?
I'd say I'm also a fan. I think, I like his kind of straight talking, plain speaking style. The fact that he stands for what he believes in. He's true to his principles. He isn't bought up by super PAC like a lot of these other people. And he's very similar to a politician that we have in the UK. He's the leader of the Labour Party, known as Jeremy Corbyn. Wait,
are they comparable, though? I really wonder if... But go ahead. I don't know that much about Corbyn.
Yeah, I'd say we'd get onto the policies in a minute, but I think their backgrounds, their career paths are somewhat comparable in the sense that they've both been representatives for quite a long time, and it's a situation where it's only very outspoken, and it's a situation where it's only been in the last few years where they're starting to get due recognition. And I think that's because of the kind of change in political spectrum. But it's also that, it's just that situation of, it feels like they're like the only ones in Congress who haven't sold out yet. So it feels like these presidential runs and these runs of popularity could have potentially happened 20 or 30 years ago if they had shook hands and made deals and schmoozed with the right people. But I feel like both of them kind of paid the price of staying true to their principles and not compromising on them, at least on the key areas. And now, after some time, they're beginning to reap the benefits of that in a way, in terms of their, them having quite strong, loyal popularity and following.
It would be interesting to break down the parallels, just for the American audience, just breaking down, their rise to popularity came at the same time as these figures obviously Trump, and then the Brexiters, so people like the guy with the funny hair, what's his name?
Boris Johnson. Yeah,
Boris Johnson,
Conservative MP.
these chaps. So I mean, like it'd be interesting to break that down. But I suppose, well, you were saying something interesting to me earlier, which had to do with Bernie's age, and I don't mean to make that sound like it's a bad thing, but I definitely feel as though that it's a valid point that we can actually discuss, and it might be overlooked by those hardened so-called Bernie bros that are out there.
So yeah, I would say this. In talking about his age, I'm not trying to be ageist here, and it goes beyond just the simple fact of he's old. There is of course the fact that there is somewhat of a risk to national security if he were to become president. We have to bear in mind that if he were to win the 2020 elections at the time of inauguration in January 2021, right? He would be 79 years of age. Like,
it's a good age.
That is quite old. I mean,
that's the golden years, man.
Like, what is life? What's the rate of longevity typically for American males? I don't even think it's 79 years of age. Do you know what I mean?
Nah, it's probably like it's more like, I think 75? It's 72 for men and 75 for women.
Yeah, like I know it's somewhere in the 70s, and it is not necessarily maybe 79. Like, how old? I don't know. Do you have any grandparents still surviving, or?
Well, yeah. So I have a grandpa. He's in his mid 80s.
Yep.
And he's like, his faculties are all together. I wouldn't say that he should be president because he doesn't necessarily have a background in politics.
Yeah, that's the
he's
really
still
formula.
Out there. Every year he does this like octogenarian golf tournament. Like he organizes it and then whoops ass in it. You know, like he's still there. But so the age question came up, and it when we're talking about Trump, of course, it comes up alongside of his health issues.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit more than just like the ageism, because we there's questions
You're not a spring chicken anymore. You're 79.
Actually overweight. No, exactly.
With Trump as well. Similar thing with Trump.
But I think Trump on his own, like they say that the official White House Surgeon General or whoever does the physicals. He says that Trump is however many pounds.
I think about 230 pounds.
6'3".
No, but that's the thing.
Right, 234, whatever. Yeah. And there's questions surrounding the legitimacy of that.
And the thing is, even like maybe he may even be more than 230 pounds. And even if he was 230 pounds, he's clearly not 6'3". Like anybody with a pair of eyes can see that. Like Obama himself is
the same height as
typically
Obama,
put at about 6'1", and Donald Trump is kind of essentially his height, maybe even slightly shorter. So if he's around that height, 6 foot, 6'1", then 230 pounds isn't the best
I'm sure
way
there's
to be at.
Conspiracy theories here that Trump's slouching or Obama's wearing high heels. I don't know.
I'm sure they will, but
anywho,
6'3" is a jump, and it's the type of thing where I actually think about it. I have an uncle, yes, he's about 6'1", I would say, and he's about 220 pounds, and he's not small. He's not like he's not like obscenely fat, but
he's a big fella.
Yeah, he's got like a bit of a pot belly there. Like he's not in the like slimmest of shapes. And Donald Trump to me looks bigger than him.
Yeah,
that makes you feel better now. You could like continue going on your bloody beer boozes with the vodka tree, huh?
You know me. So I mean, the overweight factor is just one area of concern with Trump.
Yeah.
The thing, age exacerbates that. It obviously does worse damage to like the joints, and then there's questions of if he has dementia.
Yep.
Which is an interesting. I mean, obviously these are things that we can't actually know unless we were doctors examining Trump.
Yeah, in terms of like his short fuse and his limited vocabulary range, his
and how he talks.
erraticness, yeah.
And he talks in circles. He doesn't complete his sentences.
Very, very
He's
rarely.
Rants. And then he just says some random phrase like, "We're going to build a wall," and then it's like,
yeah,
the
midnight mood swings. That we just see, illustrated so well on his Twitter account.
Right, just seeing the outrageous times that he's tweeting.
Yeah,
but that might have to do with another theory. No, we're getting into the weeds here, but these wouldn't really be an issue unless it was for his age, and so there's legitimate concerns surrounding Trump's age, and so I see why you might have legitimate claims to Bernie Sanders' age. I don't know, I'm just not seeing it because Bernie Sanders seems like a legitimately more healthy person, both in his demeanor. You can kind of tell that his mindset is a bit more healthy, but it seems like he's got to do some exercise. Obama was doing the jump shot. He had his exercise regime.
Well, Obama was Obama's 57, Tim.
Yeah, he was the youngest president to be sworn in. He was younger than JFK.
Wait, but he's not the youngest though. I think it's Hardin. President Hardin may be the youngest. I think he was sworn in his early 40s / in his late 30s. What's his name again?
People in the comments can yell Warren G. Harding. I don't.
Am I gonna be that guy to Google it right now?
Well, it's bound to be Calvin Coolidge. I think would be the youngest one.
So,
it's Calvin Coolidge.
Yeah, so youngest U.S. president. It could. I think it's one of those two. Oh, so I guess no. I was completely off about what Jay Harding. I don't know where I got that from, but it's Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, and then JFK. JFK was 43 when he was sworn in. Then Bill Clinton, 46. Ulysses S. Grant. I guess that's the dude. Was that the dude after Lincoln, right?
Yes.
46, and then Obama at 47.
Wow, I stand corrected. Okay, but
47 versus 79, mate, in terms of Sanders and when he would be sworn in.
Ulysses S. Grant. I'm still, anywho, but these kind of problems. If Ulysses S. Grant. If you've seen pictures of him, he kind of looks like a big dude.
Yeah.
And they had different health issues back then.
I suppose in terms of
die of tuberculosis.
46 in the 19th century is different to 46 in the 21st century. You're absolutely right there. But then there's still, cases such as, up until recently, the average age for a president seemed to be early to mid 50s. Like George W. Bush, I think was in his mid 50s when he was sworn in. Then there was Bill Clinton, of course, who was relatively younger. Then there was George H.W. Bush, who was in his 60s. Ronald Reagan was in his late 60s. And even then they were talking about issues concerning his age. There again, I'll give that man his props, even though he was one of the older presidents. The guy did get, he was one of the only ones who got shot down and survived and lived to tell the tale. So it's no doubt that guy wasn't lacking, it
was a ricocheted bullet.
You
didn't take a direct shot. It was a ricochet.
How sensitive of you, man.
All right, man. He was a survivor, I guess. But
yeah. Despite his age.
I guess, since we're talking about age and presidents, especially with Trump, we see that he's very out of touch. And this is something that you, British Tim, you were bringing up with Sanders, and he might be a bit out of touch to kind of more of the modern problems like the gig economy, deindustrialization, those type of issues that we're facing nowadays.
Yeah, so I think even in the cases where, I don't know, I feel like we can't, it's not fair to just say he's not as bad as Trump, because Trump is an outlier in so many different ways. Just because we have him as president doesn't mean that we should start lowering the standards to that point. I don't know.
No, I got you. I got you.
Because at the end of the day, like, okay, you can talk about aspects of Trump being out of touch, and I can see that, and I agree with you. But to be honest, I feel like, first of all, a lot of those Congress people, a lot of those representatives are out of touch to a very large degree. But then I think whether it's Trump, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, all of these people who are basically kind of like 65 and up or like 70 and upwards, I just think it's when you get into that age, it is quite difficult for you not to be out of touch. I don't know. Think about like, I don't know about you, but I think about the conversations I have with some of the older members in my family in terms of my parents or my aunts and my uncles, and on the odd occasion my like grandparents or my grandma. And there's just certain things that, in terms of the economy, relationships, marriage, families, society, culture, it just can't necessarily relate to. They're not in touch with it. They're not engaging in that society on a regular basis. It's not crucial to them anymore. They're past that point.
Well, I suppose so, and I agree with you on that. But I feel as though where Bernie's coming from, he's able to adapt easier and change his views, if that makes sense. Because a lot of people who kind of get stuck in their ways, they're part of this intellectual tradition that, results in this end of history type thinking, where this is the final say and everything after this is just stupid. It's just mumble rap, like everything else is downhill. Pull up your pants there, boy. Like it's that type of thinking that kind of prevents them from being able to adapt. Like I feel as though issues like the gig economy can be addressed better by a democratic socialist than a very like Reaganomics-esque Trump, if you understand what I mean. Because these problems that are persisting continue to follow that same critique that are the traditions of people like Bernie Sanders.
I would say, so, I don't know, like I mentioned to you before, a lot of Bernie Sanders' policies, like, I agree with where Bernie Sanders is coming from on an ideological basis. I empathize with him a lot there, and during the 2016, in the lead up to the 2016 election, I was like, very, as an outsider looking in anyway, I was very supportive of Bernie, rooting for him to win the nomination, and, it kind of just broke my heart and, just sort of rubbed me the wrong way when we saw that Clinton again turned out to be the not successful nominee. And, I dig him ideologically, but I still just think that you talk about how he's played a crucial role in helping shift the Overton window in terms of before Sanders came along, socialism is still a dirty word in some parts of the US
Absolutely.
mainstream, but it was a much dirtier word back then. And it was barely spoken about. The idea of significantly higher taxes, free college education, universal healthcare were not mentioned in the mainstream media, whereas now it's the topic that's dominating it. And kudos to him. Thank you, Bernie, for helping to do your part there. And that is the thing. Another thing I do want to mention as well is it seems like, at least in the USA, there seems to be this very much kind of, I don't know, it's like this Uberman, I don't even know how to kind of term it, but this type of culture is almost like reverse Messiah complex, where everybody's it's like life is a movie, and everybody is looking to identify the person who's going to be the protagonist and kind of connect all of the dots and save the world at the end of the day. And that's what the role of president is increasingly beginning to look like. It's kind of like anybody who has a decent brain on them and can make change has to run for president. And it's like, well, you know, there are many other ways of having an impact and making change where you don't have to be the president. You can serve as a cabinet member. You can just serve as an influential member of parliament. You could be like Martin Luther King and play that role as an activist and still be very impactful. So there's also that, I'd say. Just because he's good at what he does and he's effective doesn't mean that he has to be president.
All right. Well, so this kind of ties into my hot take on the Bernie campaign.
Yeah.
And as a Bernie bro, it kind of tears me up to say it. We're taking it back, y'all. We're taking back Bernie bro. It's a good thing now.
Yeah.
But I really feel as though Bernie losing would be the best possible outcome.
This is an interesting theory. Elaborate, please do.
Well, so I mean, there's a lot of issues with his campaign. He's not endorsed by the establishment. We saw that in the 2016 campaign. They'll go so far as to just defraud American voters to push him out. He's pretty old. We gotta be upfront about that. There's questions about whether or not he can serve those 4 whole years. 4 whole years.
Or 8
terms.
whole years, possibly. You know, 87.
Exactly.
No, mate.
And so what we have, you know, last time he ran, he really stoked something in America, which was all of these younger politicians coming to the fold. You know, AOC, Omar Olan.
Yep.
Wait, do I have her name backwards? Omar Olan. Olan Omar.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other Muslim lady who was running for a seat in Detroit, I think.
Oh my gosh, why have I forgotten her name? But yes, so you have all of these young, very progressive, outspoken leaders being elected to Congress who are pushing for, you know, really shifting the dialogue to something that's that's productive for the American workers.
Yeah.
So I really feel as though, you know, I would love to see him in office. That would be freaking great. But I think that, you know, getting him up on stage in the main debates and just completely obliterating all of these like faux progressive,
like your Cory
Kristen
Bookers and your Kamala Harris's,
all of them. You know, just getting up there and obliterating them, and you know, putting them where they are. I think that would be the best move he could make for American politics, because it would downplay that whole fear of socialism, that whole like taboo of discussing it. Just like, you know, AOC came out with the 70% tax on wealth above. What was it? Marginal tax rates. Like, you know, that couldn't have happened pre-Bernie 2016 campaign. Yeah. It really couldn't have. And so that'll continue to fester. But I think that one thing that Bernie's campaign, whether he gets the nomination or whether he wins the presidency or not, that will stoke even more and push it even further into the future, which, as we all know, is a socialist utopia filled with gulags and free college. So that's my hot take.
But yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's an interesting like theory to kind of expound there, and I think I can agree with it in many ways in terms of it's a situation where I don't know, I think he has his role there as the unsung hero, just like how, I don't know whether it's basketball. I don't even really watch basketball, so I don't know if I can use that as an example. But I think of football or soccer for, you know, some of our listeners, depending on where you're from. And it's like, okay, in soccer, a lot of people think of, you know, your strikers and your key midfielders, your Lionel Messi's and your Cristiano Ronaldo's, in terms of the ones who are the face of the team and help them to win games because they're the ones who score the goals.
Right.
But then with that, in those teams, you know, just for the Lionel Messi, you know, there's a Xavi, or for the Cristiano Ronaldo, there's I can't even think of it, for I haven't watched football in ages. But like there are other key players like the holding midfielder, the defense, the goalkeeper,
the midfielders. Yeah.
Exactly, where
definitely
they're not necessarily there scoring goals every week, but maybe they're the ones who are creating the chances for those strikers to score goals, or they're the ones who are preventing, you know, their goals from, you know, being wasted, in terms of, Ronaldo scores 2 goals and then the opposition scores 3 goals 20 minutes later, and then it's all gone to waste.
They're the ones setting up the cross, you know? They're the ones kicking the cross in and having the striker have that. I can get behind that.
Okay, I'll say this then. For the football fans who are listening, I guess more so the long-time football fans, I feel like Sanders... Soccer fans, yes, soccer fans.
Football, soccer, yeah.
Yeah, I'll say that Sanders is the Makelele of politics. And for those of you who don't follow soccer, or maybe didn't follow it back then, because he's long retired now, but he was a French defensive midfielder who played for both Real Madrid and eventually Chelsea. And it was this situation where he was not a glamorous footballer. If you look at his goal scoring record, in like the hundreds of games he's played, I think he may have scored less than 20 goals, something ridiculous like that. Yes?
But his assists...
I say this, it's not even necessarily his assists, but he does his job. He is known to be a very reliable player and one of the best holding midfielders of his generation. If you had Makelele on your team, you knew that your defense and your back four were going to be somewhat solid, and he was going to be reliable. He wasn't going to like let things slip. And it was an interesting situation because he spent his last few years in Chelsea, at Chelsea Football Club in London, and it's this crazy situation where prior to that he was playing for Real Madrid. And of course, back when he was playing there, you know, it was in his more glamorous years. That's when they had David Beckham and Ronaldo and Michael Owen and Zinedine Zidane. Yep.
Oh, dude, Zidane?
Yeah.
Headbutt guy?
Yeah, they had like... There was
people.
A period from like 2002 to about 2004, 2005, where Real Madrid just had, like, it was the kind of epitome of their Galacticos, which is like their nickname in terms of like the super team, like team of the galaxies.
They were like the dream team.
Yeah, it was like, I don't know, I guess you could say it was an equivalent to like the Chicago Bulls back when like Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, all those guys were playing for them.
All right, I'll buy into it. So you heard it here first. This is a 4T's hot take.
Yeah. So essentially,
Bernie Sanders is
the Makelele. Makelele.
What a silly name.
Of
Bernie
politics.
Sanders is Makelele.
So just to quickly finish that point, okay, so when Makelele was part of Real Madrid and part of this super team, this dream team, it was easy for him to get lost in the shuffle. It was easy for people to focus on, David Beckham and his fancy hair, and Ronaldo, and look at all of the goals he's scoring, and forget about Makelele. And it reached a point where the manager of the club kind of spoke disparagingly about Makelele, saying, he's a boring player, he rarely like moves past like the second half, like just basically saying, fuck this guy, like I don't fuck with him, you know.
Yeah.
And it's this interesting situation where the moment they sold him off to Chelsea, the performance of their team declined. They didn't win shit. They didn't win anything. Despite having all of these great players, they didn't win anything for like 2 or 3 seasons. And lo and behold, the moment Chelsea gets Makelele, they go on the biggest run and come up ever. This was the time when Chelsea became the club that it is today, because, you know, like, for people who have watched football for a bit of a longer time, like, when I was growing up, when I was like 8, you know, back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, Chelsea was just another mid-tabling team. Chelsea didn't make you bat an eyelid. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, this rich Russian guy who's looking for a way to launder his money and, you know, get a tax write-off, start spending money, throwing money at the club. And one of the key acquisitions was Makelele, and boom. Ever since then, they haven't looked back.
No. Don't talk about Russians, man.
Yeah, okay.
In your metaphor, in your parent, don't mention it. Like,
yes, yeah. I might trigger certain listeners, but that's
so
what...
don't. There's no parallel between Makelele in this aspect.
And that's why I say Bernie is the Makelele of politics, in terms of he's that unsung hero. His presence, his very presence, is going to have some sort of impact or influence to the point where he doesn't need to be president to make a difference.
Well, no, absolutely. And more importantly, it already has.
Yes.
You know, you won't be able to see his impact until after.
Yeah.
Which is really, like, that's one for the history books.
Exactly.
Like, the impact that he's had in politics throughout his tenure.
Yeah.
Not just recently, but, like, his time in the Senate. Like, he's done some great stuff, so...
Yeah. Okay, so, no, exactly. I agree with you on that. And, again, he has already made a difference. But, there's just still that thing of... Yeah, also, like, we spoke before about his solutions surrounding the economy and how he can reduce income inequality and help make life easier for just, you know, regular workers, make it more bearable. And again, I feel like those solutions he's mentioning in terms of, you know, stronger unions, higher taxes, what are some of the others? Like... free college education, universal healthcare. Some of them I can get behind, but there are others where he's talking about unionizing and taxation, where it's going under the assumption that the economic, like, there's gonna, like, in like the coming years or decades, there's going to continue to be an economic structure where you can easily tax people's incomes, and there's a workforce solid and stable enough to be unionized, where in my eyes it doesn't seem like the future is headed in that direction. It's headed in a space where, again, we're going to have like a lot more independent freelance workers. There are going to be companies operating internationally. There's all these loopholes as to how they can get around that. And I just feel those solutions, they're kind of 20th century. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I got you on that. You know, like, the gig economy is something that's hard to address. Really, though, the reason why I feel as though he will be able to address those issues more readily than, say, some of the more people to the right.
No, I agree with you. I'm not saying that. Like, yeah.
No, and then we won't see a young whippersnapper for a long time who can deal with those kind of issues. But, you know, even the technologists or the, you know, techno-Marxists who are debating, dang it, I dropped the Marx word. The people in academia who are wrestling with these issues and trying to come up with the solutions always come back to the one thing, and it's these economic factors that are easily addressed to things like taxation, economic equality, economic opportunity. You know, they might be dressed up in fancy new terms, but that's not necessarily the larger picture, which is the economic issues, and that's something that we need this long-standing critique for. And you know, like Sanders may not be perfect on addressing like open source issues on the internet. I get that. Like
Yes.
he didn't grow up in open source culture, so he doesn't necessarily know
Yeah.
how important open source is for the internet. Like that's fine.
Yeah. Open
He can
source
have
or like working freelance or like gig economy
no
or
right. Like
Uber. There's a
the
lot of
open
different
source
things.
life, which is really I think that's what you're kind of going off to.
Yeah.
And we can discuss this more, but like open source borders, open source work in
Yeah.
general. You know,
Yes.
having greater freedoms, not necessarily constrained by such physical realities as borders.
As well as a greater
the,
need, to in terms of looking at the way the markets work and the fact that more money is being made in emerging markets such as China and India. There will be cases where you might need to uproot and go from one place to another for a couple years simply because that's where the work and the money is. And how do these tax people, you tax people regularly on that income, or you unionize them when they're like self-employed or they don't stay in one place for more
I
than a
gotcha.
year, for example, or even like one
Transnational
city.
labor unions, I suppose.
If there's like some kind of
kind of
if there's some
jumping the
kind
gun
of
on your point.
like if there's something laid out as to how that can work, I'm more than willing to give it a listen. In terms of
No,
Bernie
that's beyond
Sanders
the point.
not being perfect on it, yeah, I'll give you that. But I feel like again there are some younger candidates out there running on a Democratic ticket who I feel deserve a look in, and I think one person in
Ooh.
particular, I don't know if you come across him, is this Andrew Young dude.
Who?
Andrew Young, a Chinese American, 44-year-old
Okay.
Democrat running for president, who is running on a platform of universal basic income along with a number of other areas. His background, he's apparently a serial entrepreneur. He seems like he comes from Silicon Valley. Like, it seems
Oh
like
no,
somebody who is,
you're killing me.
I don't know, like, at the end of the day, he seems like somebody who's better able to understand the problems affecting people today than a 77-year-old politician for Vermont who's been in that post for like 40 plus years. Like, I don't know.
But these oh gosh, this will devolve into another conversation. I don't actually know him,
Yeah, check him
so
out, I'd say.
I'll have to excuse my own ignorance. But what I do know about Silicon Valley types, maybe he does come from a more critical take on economics.
Yes. And the
But
economy.
if he's purely like this, if he's like this Mark Zuckerberg type, where he doesn't really understand the ramifications of technology beyond the scope of just like, oh, let's make a bunch of money, then it'll lead to more problems, which is like what Uber's created with the gig economy. What Airbnb has done to the housing crisis in Silicon Valley, for
and
example.
other major cities like New York, London. Yeah, we see it here as well. Yeah, you're right.
Oh, of course. Yeah, here as well. Just people living in absolute squalor.
Yeah.
Just, and it's kind of one of these issues where we do need somebody who's from that old school of thought. But, I think that there should be a synthesis.
Yeah.
This is where my point comes in, where, like the president isn't a perfect being and he's not omniscient. He's not that messiah figure that America's hoping for.
Yeah.
But he's able to have advisors and people around him who he listens to and trusts because they're intelligent in this area, and he's able to create some sort of dialectic in their thinking to address the issue in a way that they fully support. And Bernie Sanders is that type of guy where, he doesn't know that much about the internet. Like, that's fine. He was born in 1941. That's
but
almost
then
a half a century.
You also don't know what you don't know. So if he doesn't know that much about the internet, who's to say that he's in the best position to receive advice as to how he should create policy for the internet? Even if he gets policy recommendations, is he in the best place to assess them, and understand which one is the best one to pick? We can say, they have advisors and they have these things, but it's like, for example, I don't know, we can talk about like building a factory that makes a particular seed for palm trees, and I could tell you, look, I'm going to give you some advisors, man. I'm going to give you some advisors. You seem like a smart guy, just talk to the advisors. Would you still be comfortable even with those advisors making decisions on how to manufacture seeds that can help grow the best palm trees?
Well, see, this is where the burn comes out, is because he knows politics and he understands who gives better advice. Is it this?
But then there's policy area. There is, like we was talking about, like
the
internet,
so
the modern economy, the gig economy. He has to have an understanding or some connection to it himself. And if he doesn't, how's he going to really be able to relate?
Well, and he could get more well-read in this area, but the fundamentals stand true, that if you understand that vested interests will always propel themselves, then you can understand never to trust somebody with vested interests. Don't listen to somebody from Uber about legislation about the gig economy. You know what I mean? Listen to actual taxi drivers. Listen to the taxi union about ride hailing.
Yeah.
Or address both sides. Maybe take one with a grain of salt. Maybe take both with a grain of salt. And this is something that he's done in his career. One recent example is the war in Yemen, which I think is a bit of a strange area, but what he did was actually extremely successful, because he got establishment Democrats behind a push to end a war that essentially began with Obama.
Yes. Yeah. Like in 2014.
That's a major. He saw the momentum behind the Khashoggi killer, the killing of Khashoggi.
Yeah.
And he took that momentum that the Democrats felt, that animosity towards the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and he pushed for legislation. He pushed for that legislation. He passed it. He was a successful legislator, and whether or not it was signed by the president is a whole other ordeal. But he successfully lobbied for legislation to be passed. As a legislator, that's a huge move, which is just brilliant thinking on his hand. So I think when it comes down to that, not just like geopolitical, but also geo-capitalistic, if I could use that term. Like,
oh wow, okay, yeah.
Geo-capitalistic. He has those. So it's not necessarily that he knows exactly what to do at all times, but he knows which avenues to take and when to take them.
No, that is a good point you make, and I will give Sanders his props too there, in terms of he has been responsible for introducing a number of different pieces of legislation, such as the one you just mentioned regarding the Yemen war.
Wear my headset up here?
Okay, it's fine.
Better?
Yeah, hello?
Okay.
Yeah. The Yemen piece of legislation. I know there was another one surrounding college, I think free college education in New York City, that he helped get behind and ensure succeeded. And then there was another bill he passed with Elizabeth Warren recently. I'll give, he does have a track record in terms of trying to grasp and propose modern solutions to modern issues. I'll give you that, yes. Mm-hmm. So on that note, I guess we're going to close up shop here. But before we end, I don't know, I guess your answer confused me a bit. But you seem like a Bernie bro, but then you did say that you hope he doesn't actually win the nominations. So if that is the case, who do you want? Who do you want to become president? Who are you rooting for?
Oh man, this is a kind of a sticky area right now. Like, I honestly just want to see Trump stay president, and this is controversial, man. A Bernie bro saying it, but you know he's slowly dismantling the U.S. empire, just fumbling around and being a bumbling idiot about it. So let's see more of that. Let's see the dismantling of the U.S. empire. Let's see more people actually question, you know, why is American foreign and domestic policy this way? How can we make it better? You know, people are starting to ask real questions and not just finding it in the faux so-called resistance.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
We already know who you're behind there, Mr. Young.
No, I'm not behind. I'm not behind Andrew Young. I don't think it's. I don't think he has a realistic chance of winning the Democratic nominations. Who do you think I'm behind?
Interesting. Beto O'Rourke.
No. I think for me he's too moderate.
He's a young fella. He skateboards.
Mockery now is becoming like this now. It's kind of.
I'm just kidding.
It's kind of contradictory. It contradicts my previous point about Sanders' age, but she is still a fair bit younger than him. I guess on a relative scale, and I say I'm rooting for Warren, Elizabeth Warren.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, she's someone I've been following for about nearly 5 years now, and
not bad.
her understanding of economics is very solid, and she's very good at communicating her ideas and relating them to like everyday folk. She just seems like, I guess, in matters concerning the economy, like I almost don't want her to be president. I'd prefer for her to take the position as Treasury Secretary rather than president. But if that's what she's running for, then so be it. In terms of, she would be the person who I'd view as best at dealing with the economy. Her knowledge and her like grounding in it is like so strong. She has a previous experience with the Consumer Finance Bureau that she headed. She's a no nonsense person, and she can cut through the bullshit. She's a tough woman, you know, fierce, and I like it.
Well, I will partially agree with you on that there, just to round things out. Pretty good.
Okay. I guess that's our quick, quick, but, you know, turned out into something a little longer, but our conversation, you know, that we have been meaning to have about this Sanders nomination. We just thought we'd kind of, you know, do you guys a favor, give you guys the privilege of listening on it, you know? You are the flies on the wall. Let us know what you think. Talk some shit. Subscribe to us. Follow us on our socials, you know, the usual jazz, all of that stuff.
Absolutely. From Tall Tim and British Tim here at the 4Ts.
The hottest leftist podcast in China. Yeah.
Y'all have a good one out there.